Hi, I'm Debbie and this is Book and Bujo. Welcome if you're new and welcome back if you've been here before. Today I'm happy to say that I have completed my art fantasy bingo for April 2023 to March of 2024. Let's take a look and see what I read. Our fantasy bingo is super fun. I've participated in the last couple years of bingo cards and it's just been very enjoyable finding new authors and some new books that are favorites now and pushing me out of my comfort zone a little bit into some new categories and new reads. So what is our fantasy bingo? So over on Reddit, and the Our Fantasy puts together a bingo card every year with 25 spaces on it for you to read and enjoy and find out a little bit more in the fantasy, sci-fi, and horror categories and get you out of your comfort zone and get the spotlight on some new authors. There's 3 different ways you can participate in the Our Fantasy bingo. The first one is you just do the bingo card as is and do the prompt and do the read. The other way is to do hard mode. So hard mode is you take the normal prompt and you add a secondary prompt to that and then do that for your read. The third mode is you do the regular prompt, the hard prompt, and you post a review of the book somewhere in social media. You could post it on YouTube, you could post on Instagram or on Goodreads or Storygraph, anywhere like that to just get the word out about the book that you read. So of course, you all know me by now and you know what mode I chose. Of course, I chose hero mode. I review all my books anyway, so there was no way I was not going to go hero mode. So let's get started and see what each of the prompts are and what book I read for them. Prompt number 1 was a title with a title, and for hard mode, not royalty. So it could not be king or queen or prince or princess. So it had to be a different type of title. And so I read A Master of Gin by P. Djeli Clark. And I thoroughly enjoyed this book and had a lot of fun reading this one. And I can't wait to pick up more of P. Djeli Clark's books. I believe there's a novella or a companion novel that goes with A Master of Gin. So I'm interested in checking that out as well. Another thing with Our Fantasy Bingo is you cannot read the same author twice. So out of the 25 prompts, you can only use one author once. So with P. Djeli Clark, I wouldn't be able to then read his novella or companion novel for another prompt. That wouldn't count because they want you to read more authors. Prompt number 2, superheroes. Hard mode is not related to DC or Marvel. And for this I read Vicious, which is the first book in the Villains series by V.E. Schwab. And I can't believe it took me this long to read that book because it is so good and I can't wait to start Vengeful later this year, especially since I think there's a 3rd book coming out in the series. Very excited for it. Third prompt, bottom of the TBR. Hard mode? There is none because apparently this book is hard enough for you to get to because it's still at the bottom of your TBR. And for that I read A Midsummer Night's Dream by William Shakespeare. Now I'm not the biggest fan of flowery prose and poetical writing, so while I enjoy Shakespeare, it takes a bit for me to actually pick it up and read it. So this has been on my TBR probably since Dead Poets Society came out with Robin Williams way back when. I don't even, was that in the 90s maybe? So yeah, it's been on my TBR for quite a while and I did finally get to it and I did enjoy it. I listened to the audiobook whilst reading the ebook and that helped a lot because it was more of a dramatized audiobook and so it felt more like just watching the play. Prompt number 4, magical realism. Hard mode, it cannot be on the top 30 list that was provided by Our Fantasy Bingo. And for that I read The Witches of New York, book 1 in the series by Amy McKay. I definitely enjoyed this book and I'm glad I finally picked it up. Prompt number 5, young adult book, and for hard mode, it had to be published in the last 5 years, which means from 2019 to 2023. There's actually a couple different books I could have picked, but went with the first one I read that year. The Red Squirrels of Magic by Cassandra Clare. I also read A Chain of Thorns, which could have worked, but I wrote down The Red Squirrels of Magic. Prompt number 6, mundane jobs. And hard mode is that it doesn't take place on Earth. So it could be a made-up world or a different planet. Maybe it's a book about someone on the moon that is a farmer or whatever. That type of thing works. And I read Ascendant, which is book 1 in the Songs of Chaos series by Michael R. Miller. And I loved that. Dragon stories are always amazing, and the main character was apprenticing to be a cook. Prompt number 7, published in the 2000s. Hard mode, again, not in the top 30 list that was provided by our Fantasy Bingo. I read Inkheart by Cornelia Funke, and that is the first book in the Ink World series. While I did enjoy the book, I actually think I liked the movie a little bit better. Not sure if I'm going to continue the series or not, but if I have another prompt where I need to pick up a book and that one fits, then I will. But I'm not going to go out of my way for it. I think if I had read it when I was much younger, so middle grade time period, I think I would have thoroughly enjoyed that book. But as an adult, it didn't hit quite the same. Book number 8. Now this is the final book that I read for completing the bingo, and the prompt is angels or demons. So the book needs to have angels or demons in it, and the hard mode is that the angel or the demon needs to be the protagonist. So I did read a book earlier that had angels and demons in it, but the main character was a human, so that did not count. The secondary kind of like the main of the secondary characters were both angels and demons, but I could not count that one as the protagonist because they weren't. So I did finally find one on my e-reader, and that was I, Angel by J.C. Andrzejewski, and that is the first book in the Angels in LA series, and I definitely enjoyed that one. It's a little slow going at times. It's overall it's a fast-paced book, and the main character is really interesting. The side characters are intriguing. Like I do want to know a little bit more, but then they're also kind of flat, if that makes any sense. Like one of them's just kind of annoying, the other one is cutesy, and the third one is supposed to be mysterious but just kind of falls a little flat. They're just kind of like a blank slate. So we'll see what the second book brings for that, because the main character is interesting enough to continue with the series. Prompt number 9, 5 short stories. And the hard mode is an entire sci-fi fantasy anthology or a collection. I actually read a couple different ones and I thoroughly enjoyed both of them, but I picked the one I read first, which was The Language of Thorns, and that is by Leigh Bardugo. And that is a collection of short stories that children in the Grishaverse would be told as they are growing up. I do have to mention the other one though, because it is such a good collection of short stories, and that is The Advent of Winter, which was put together by Dom McDermitt from Dominish Books here on YouTube, and I will leave his channel linked down below if you want to check him out. And you got a short story every day from December 1st to December 24th, and it is now available on Kindle, I believe, or e-readers if you want to check it out, because all of the stories were so good. There was like maybe 2, maybe 3 of the 24 that were good but not great, but they were very enjoyable. And then there was probably at least a dozen that just really stood out, the new favorite authors and old authors that I've read before that I love, and just the whole collection was amazing. So check out The Advent of Winter. But I did read The Language of Thorns by Leigh Bardugo for that prompt. Prompt number 10, read a horror book. Hard mode, cannot be by Stephen King or H.P. Lovecraft. This was actually fairly easy for me. I have read Stephen King in the past and his writing is good, but it's just not my style of horror that I like. And I think I've read one book that was in the style of H.P. Lovecraft. It was like a tip of the hat to H.P. Lovecraft, but I've never actually read any of their books. So that's someone I will have to check out in the future. But I ended up reading one of my favorite horror authors, and that is Slewfoot by Brom. And I loved this book. My absolute favorite from Brom so far is Krampus, the Yule Lord, and Slewfoot is right up there too. A little bit different style, but the artwork is amazing. He does all the artwork in his books as well. Totally check him out. He's a great author. All right, that's 2 rows down, 3 more to go. Prompt number 11 is either self-published or indie published. For hard mode, they need to have less than 100 ratings on Goodreads. And I read Quiet Thunder by J.P. Harker. Now, Quiet Thunder was kindly offered to me for free to read for J.P. Harker for my honest review, and I will have linked in the cards above my review for that book, but I thoroughly enjoyed it. I thought it was a lot of fun, it was interesting, and it was a great little fantasy. Prompt number 12. Set in the Middle East. Hard mode. The author is of Middle Eastern origin, and there was a few that I could have used for this. I did think of using A Master of Jinn, but in the end I ended up reading We Hunt the Flame by Hasfa Fazil. And I'm so glad I finally got to this book. I've been wanting to read this book for a couple of years now, and I finally was able to get it into my TBR for this bingo. And I'm glad I finally read it. Prompt number 13. A book published in 2023, and for hard mode, it had to be a debut author. And I read Wayward by Amelia Hart. I actually really liked that. I know there's some mixed reviews on it, but I thought it was great. Totally enjoyed it, glad I read it. Prompt number 14, multiverses. And the hard mode is not a literal door to get to the other world. So no like portal fantasies where like Chronicles of Narnia where you open the door to the wardrobe and you go through, so that would not work for hard mode. And I read Piranesi by Susanna Clark. That one was definitely interesting. I could see how categorized kind of as dark academia and somewhat mythological fantasy, magical realism. Yeah, it was very interesting. I'm glad I finally picked that one up as well. Prompt number 15, a POC author. Hard mode. The book takes place in a futuristic sci-fi world. And I read Home, which is the second book in the Binti series by Nnedi Okorafor. Prompt number 16, a book club or a read-along book. Hard mode is that it had to be a current Our Fantasy Bingo book club or read-along, and you had to participate in the discussion. That one, it was hard to find one, but I finally did find one of a current book that they were reading, and that was Spice Road by Maya Ibrahim. I had mixed feelings on this book, so I did like it. I felt it was slow. I typically don't mind a slow read, but this one just felt extra slow in parts, and like it wasn't really going anywhere, and I felt the ending was a little flat. It was good. I'm glad I read it. I thought it was interesting, but it's not a new favorite, and if a second book comes out in the series, I may or may not pick it up. We'll see. 17. Read a novella. Hard mode. It could not be published by Tor.com Publishing. This was actually fairly easy. I read The Exile by Ryan Cahill, who is a self-publisher. He does everything himself, the printing, everything. And oh my gosh, this is probably his best of the novellas so far that I've read. So good. I highly, highly recommend Ryan Cahill as an author. His Bound and the Broken series, so good. The Bloodfire is the first book. Highly recommend. He's got 3 full-length novels out in the series, as well as 3 novellas. The 4th book should be coming out either at the end of 2024 or very early in 2025. Totally pick it up. So good. And each book and novella just gets better and better and better with each one that you read. Prompt number 18, mythological beasts. Hard mode. No dragons or dragon-like creatures, so no wyverns or any of that kind of thing either. And that was a little harder because I love my dragon books. And I read A Touch of Light by Tiago Abdallah, and that one has griffins in it. Super fun. Loved it. Love that series. The Road to Avalon, I think, is the name of the series. So good. Such a good book. And the prequel novella is really good too. Prompt number 19, elemental magic. And the hard mode is no V.E. Schwab or Jim Butcher, which I had already read a V.E. Schwab book earlier, so that was okay. And I didn't want to get into the Dresden Files yet or any of the Jim Butcher ones, because at this point I was already in way too many book series read-alongs that I couldn't add another one. So that made it somewhat easier for me. And I read the second book in the Drowning Empire series, which was The Bone-Shard Emperor by Andrea Stewart, and thoroughly enjoyed that series. So good. I did finally finish it out with the Bone-Shard War by the end of the year. Prompt number 20, myths and retellings. Hard mode could not be Greek or Roman mythology. Again, fairly easy because I have a lot of books that I've been reading lately on Norse mythology, and I read Witches, which is the 6th book, I believe, in the Runes series by Edna Walters, and the whole series is based on more Norse mythology with Odin and Thor, Loki, and all of our favorite Norse gods. All right, almost done. Last row. Prompt number 21. A queer norm setting. Hard mode, not a futuristic setting, and no sci-fi elements. This was a little bit harder to find, but they do give you some suggestions in the forums at Our Fantasy Bingo, and someone suggested Pet by Akweki Emezi, and so I did read that one, and it fit just right. Such a feel-good book, and there are some trigger warnings for that one though, so just to be aware of those before you go in to read this, but it is a really, really good book. 22, a coastal setting. In hard mode, features seafaring. I do like some pirate books, so I read Tress of the Emerald Sea by Brandon Sanderson, which was his first secret project from 2020. And so good, so good. Just a feel-good book overall. You have to check out Tress of the Emerald Sea. It is such a good book. Prompt number 23 is another one that took me most of the year to finish, mainly because most of the books I found were on the larger side, and to just like randomly put them in my TBR made it harder to complete my TBR, and I never could seem to just fit it in there for some reason. And most of the books that I had read that already had Druids in, I had read them before this came up. So, which is the Runes series by Edna Walters. There's a lot of Druids in those books too, but I had already read them. So, And hard mode is you could not read Iron Druid, which actually was okay because at the time I didn't know what Iron Druid was. I do now in book series. Very good, but have not read them yet. But I chose Highland Mist by Donna Grant, and that's the first book in the series, and it was really good. It was interesting. It's not the most amazing book out there, but it was interesting enough to fly through it fairly quickly, and I am intrigued enough to pick up the second book sometime later in the year. Prompt number 24, almost done now, features a robot. And the hard mode is the robot is the protagonist. So there's a couple of ways I could have gone. Could have gone with the Murderbot series, but I ended up picking up Clara and the Sun by Kazu Ishiguro. And this is a book that has been on my TBR for quite a while. I've been wanting to read this. I've heard so many good things about it, and I was finally able to pick it up, and I did thoroughly enjoy it. Last and final prompt, prompt number 25. Read a sequel. Again, super easy because I was taking part in like 5 or 6 read-alongs, plus book clubs and all the other books that I was typically reading. There's so many sequels that I could have used for this. But the hard mode was, it had to be the 3rd book or higher in a series. So you couldn't just read a duology or just continue to the 2nd book in the series. It had to be a series that had 3 or more books in it. And it had to be a sci-fi fantasy series. And I read Midnight Tide, which was the 3rd book in the Malazan Book of the Fallen series by Stephen Erickson. And I could have really picked any of those because there was 10 books and I read all 10 of them last year. So I could have picked any of them, but that did complete the Our Fantasy Bingo for me. And I did review all of the books on Goodreads, so I will leave my Goodreads link down below if you want to check out my reviews or if you want to add me as a friend. I would love to grow my Goodreads family. And I will leave links to any of my reviews for the books either up in the cards or down in the description box below. And I cannot wait to take part in Our Fantasy Bingo starting April 1st of 2024 through March 31st of 2025. And I hope that you will participate as well. Did you participate in the 2023 to 2024 Our Fantasy Bingo? And if you did, how did you do? I'd love to find out down in the comments. What was your most surprising or most loved book that you read from the Our Fantasy Bingo? I hope you found a new favorite author as well. Maybe even a new favorite series. So I already knew I liked V.E. Schwab, but the Villains series, I am definitely intrigued. That was one that I was surprised how much I love that book. Also, Ascendant, the Songs of Chaos series. I can't wait to finish the rest of them. I've already snatched them up. They're on my Kindle and I can't wait to get to them. I will also leave a link down below to the Our Fantasy Bingo page in case you want to check out what all the prompts and hard modes and all the suggestions that people gave for them. And hopefully you will participate with me next year. Thanks for swinging by and checking out my video, and please like, comment, and subscribe if you want, and hit that notification bell up there so you don't miss any other videos from me in the future. And until next time, keep reading. Bye!